Hello, how's it going? Welcome to BornOptimistic. Thank you so much for listening. Great to have you here. Another exciting week at BornOptimistic Towers. Just yesterday, we announced a gig by Ronan O'Snuddick, lead singer of Keela, but also solo artiste. Ronan's seventh solo studio album, Or Agus Arrogant, is being released at a gig in Whelan's on October the 6th that Born Optimistic is organising for Ronan, and he's going to be a guest on the show in the coming weeks. Really looking forward to that. Can't say enough words about Ronan, and will at a future date. And also in Whelan's on September 27th, Born Optimistic, in association with the charity AidLink, are organising an event called WOW. This is the second WOW. It's Women on Wednesdays, happens once a month. It's all about female solidarity between the global north and south, and it's raising funds for girls' rights and education projects in Kenya. This gig on Wednesday, September 27th, €10 in, 7 o'clock. It features Leila Jane, Deirdre Sullivan, Rachel Lavelle, Lisa Casey and Silk. Very proud that Born Optimistic is organising those shows. And also, we're also organising another gig with AidLink in the National Concert Hall on November the 6th, which features an amazing variety of acts singing with community choirs. We've got The Pale, Paddy Casey, David Kitt, Call the Dancers, Cathy Davey, Brona Gallagher, and many, many more. This week's guest on the show, Nick Kelly. When I was a teenager, Nick Kelly's band, The Fat Lady Sings, were one of my favourite bands. A band that I literally travelled the length and breadth of Ireland to see live. And there was something really special about them. I really, really adored them. And I only got to know Nick in the last couple of years. And I just went up to him one day. I saw him out somewhere and I was like, Nick, you know, I've been a fan of yours for years and we've never met. Can we meet for a coffee sometime? And he said, sure. And we met up for a coffee, and we see each other on the school run occasionally, and we stopped for a chat. But now Nick has just released his debut feature film, which he wrote and directed. It's called The Drummer and the Keeper. It's in cinemas in Ireland right now, and it's opened on more screens in week 2 than it did in week 1. It's a hit. It's a viral hit, and people love it. And I've been to see it, and I can see why. It's a truly, truly brilliant film. It's heartwarming and emotional and thought-provoking all at the same time. So Nick, in the middle of all the world for promoting his movie, made time to come and be on Born Optimistic. And here he is. Optimism as a concept, where does that sit with you?
Well, I think objectively I must be an optimist when I look at it. I have a kind of a sort of I have an optimistic fatalism. Like, my basic theory about success is that of every 50 balls that you sling into the penalty area, 2 go into the net, and usually the 2 you least expect. So I kind of, my view generally is, I remember seeing Malcolm Gladwell writing once that genius is quantity, not quality. And I kind of agree with that. So I think you need to try a lot of things and try them in good heart, actually, not sort of grudgingly. You have to willingly suspend your own disbelief and just go for things. And then, I mean, energy definitely begets energy. I mean, that's the other thing, is that once you start doing things, even if they don't work out, or they don't work out the way you think they're going to, it is attractive to other people and other opportunities. It's like the rolling stone gathering moss. So suddenly, because you're in play, you get phone calls from somebody else like, "Oh, you seem to be you could do this, or what would you be interested in that?" So I think that's the other thing about a rational justification for optimism, is that stasis does not attract energy, whereas movement attracts energy. So even if you're not completely sure what you're doing, just do something.
Yeah, and doing something is far better than doing nothing.
Oh, I think, and it's more energizing. I think the other thing as well is that I think it's really important for us to enjoy the journey, or to take pride in the steps that you take, the putting of the one step in front of the other, that the pride in the job. And I know, if you bake bread, or if you you lay bricks. You have to enjoy that each brick is flush and that there isn't, that the mortar is neatly, you have to enjoy all the bits of it as well as the end result. And I think that's kind of important, because if you hate the process, it's going to be you're going to be hanging around a long time. And with things not turning out the way you think they're going to turn out.
And where or how and when did you acquire this wisdom?
If it be wisdom. I think I was an extremely I think sort of maladjusted child. I mean, I really liked the idea of having gangs of friends, and I did have some kind of friends, but I sort of was always trying to organize them into teams and groups and things. And it's very interesting, because I don't have any diagnoses on this level, but because I have somebody in my family who's got autism, I now find myself wondering, it would certainly explain a lot of my own social failings when I was a child and a teenager, if I happened to be on the spectrum myself. But I think that, and I made my parents send me to boarding school. I was in a day school, and I didn't feel I was getting on very well there. And then they didn't want to send me to the boarding school, but they'd had my name down since I was born. And none of the rest of my family went, but I said, no, do send me, because I'm not really enjoying my day school. So sort of a bit taken aback, because it was a year after the decision. Everybody else went a year earlier, so I turned up late in the boarding school, very young for my class. I was very young anyway. I was stupidly young for my class, which doesn't help when you hit puberty in particular. And I hadn't really realised that I would be coming with myself. I sort of think I would make this completely new start. I didn't realise my own personality would be joining me, and that and as soon as I got there, I was cast into terrible, essentially kind of, warfare with my peers. And so I kind of had quite a miserable, certainly the first couple of years in boarding school. And one thing that happened in that time was that it was a school where tennis was played a lot. And I was not a sporting child. But I thought, I will force them to like me by becoming good at tennis. So I would hit a ball up against the gym wall for literally hours every day. I know this also sounds autistic as well. And I literally 3 hours a day. And so when I went to the school at the age of, I think I was 12 or 13, but basically within 2 years, I was like number 2 in Ireland in tennis. I mean, they still didn't like me, but I had got that, and I think that thing of trying a thing and sort of almost, what is weird with tennis as well, it was just putting the ball into the court. And even if people hit nicer shots than you just keep putting the ball back in the court. And you do win.
But where did this steely determination come from? Even the idea that you were going to practice and be great at tennis, what put that into you, do you think?
I can't quite analyse. I do think there's a funny thing about how you respond to sort of being bullied or being kind of criticised. And I think that I felt that it was either, I don't think I was going to directly fight, because I wasn't very big, and nobody was really trying to fight physically with me particularly. They're more just like calling me names or ignoring me. And I just think that it's almost like a binary thing. You either, what is your choice? I mean, you either collapse into misery and are always miserable and always feel like you have to be asking permission to even walk into a room. Or you say, I don't care about your rooms. I'm not going to. So you don't want me in the room. So I never went. There was a common room, I remember, in 4th year in the school, which was out in the woods. And I literally never set foot in the common room the entire time I was there. I just thought, I know nobody wants me to be in there, and I'm not going to go into there. And so I literally never went to that place. And I thought, I can't make you like me, but I'm certainly not going to turn up for you to be mean to me. So I think maybe around that, actually, was a sort of an orneriness crept in.
A survival instinct, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I'm making it sound very Lord of the Flies, and I think that's probably unfair to certainly my peers in school. It was probably less, but it felt like that at the time. When you're in the world, and especially, being in a boarding school 12 miles from Limerick in the 1960s 70s was as you were pretty much, you were in isolation mode. There's no mobile phones, there's no internet. It's just you and all these dudes in boarding school.
But you chose that fate, and at any point did you go, I'm out of here, I want out, I made a mistake, or did you go, I'm going to stick with it?
Well, that is a really interesting question, because I felt, having chosen my fate, it was now my job to embrace it. I obviously didn't think it was going to work out like that when I went there. I think I must have been, I was very untidy and disorganized child. I had a sort of, I was very stubborn in some way or something. I think I must have been very stubborn, and I certainly didn't want to admit that I'd made a terrible mistake, and I thought it would be very embarrassing as well for my parents for me to admit that I'd made a terrible mistake. So I just thought, okay, well, you've signed up for the Foreign Legion, you better learn to like the sand.
Were there any particular books or records that helped you through, that became your friend in this time?
Well, I mean, this is the other funny thing, is that, the school, though, I kind of, everything kind of mellowed a bit as we got on. But, that's the thing about boarding schools, is that they taunt breaks out, because, you can't escape from them, but they can't escape from you either. So, they see the consequences of their own actions in a way. And so I think there's a weirdly, well, I don't know, but it got much easier as time went on. But I didn't really. I grew up in a house where I was the oldest child, and there was no popular culture at all. Like, so, Johann Sebastian Bach would be the only music in the house. We didn't really have a TV for many years. I think my father rented a black and white TV for the moon landings when I was a child. But fundamentally, we were our house was quite a high culture house. So, I read a lot of P.G. Wodehouse. I read a great deal of books. And I think the thing was, when I went to school, it was literally the first time in secondary school that I ever heard popular music. So I remember my first album I bought was Elton John's Greatest Hits in Savins in Limerick. We went in on a trip. And 3 months later, I'd bought Tea for the Tillerman, Led Zeppelin 4, and Nevermind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols. So it was like everything was truncated. My entire musical education was it was like a crash course in popular culture, because I could see that it was important as well. And I could see that music was quite a cool thing. Again, I thought, if I learned the guitar, maybe I could force people to like me that way. But I never got in the school band. And then about 10 years later, when I was touring with the Fat Lady Sings, the boys then invited the band to come and play. So it was a kind of a bizarre moment where I was playing on the stage in the school where I'd never managed to be in the school band. But it gave me an awful lot of things, because I didn't really know about music, and there was guitars lying around, so I just picked up an old Spanish guitar, and a bit like hitting the ball up against the wall in the tennis, I just taught myself some chords and got some people to teach me chords, and then I was I was sort of away. So I think actually I picked up an awful lot of things when I was in school about being an artist, actually, without really realizing I was.
Wow. And so the whole idea of you writing songs, how early did that come after you picked up this Spanish guitar in the corner?
I think that I always wrote songs. I think that I had always got good marks in English. I'd always written essays where I kind of imagined kind of like heroic essays where typically a kind of a very, very thinly disguised version of me would be in charge of a gang, very thinly disguised as some friends or people I wanted to be friends with, and we would go and solve like a sort of famous five or a secret seven. And I think that I had always, I think the reason you tend to be good at stuff is that somebody, when you were 8, gave you 10 out of 10 with 2 ticks. And I think people always had done that for English. And then and then it was funny, because I think especially Cat Stevens, actually, I think even more than Elton John, I thought they were very accessible. You could sort of see how the chords, even if you had 3 chords, you could hear a little, I don't know, I think I was always humming things to myself, actually, maybe. Anyway, even before I played an instrument. I'd been thrown out of 3 piano classes when I was 7. So for a decade, everybody, including myself, had assumed I was completely unmusical, or 8 years or whatever. But I think I must have, maybe having all the Bach when I was a kid, because you know how structured Bach is. I think and the melodies are so pure. Maybe I don't know, maybe by osmosis or something. But anyway, no, I know that literally, I mean, I wrote, they were very bad songs, but I think as soon as I started playing the guitar and learning a couple of chords, I was trying to put words on them.
And you grew up in a house, of course, where words were valued. There was a lot of value placed on words and the power of language. Yeah, I'm assuming.
Yes. Oh no, there was, and there was a lot of what's the word? There was a lot of analysis of when language was poorly used. I was to this day, I'm really nervous about using the phrase "hopefully" because apparently it doesn't exist. You should say "I hope," because there's nobody. What is the subject? Hopefully can't exist without a subject. So things like this, and I think actually P.G. Wodehouse. I would say if anybody has never read P.G. Wodehouse or John le Carré, either of those two people, I so envy you because you have such a world of incredible pleasure ahead of you. And I think, my father used to read when I was really small, myself and my younger brother, P.G. Wodehouse in bed. And I just think that the rhythms and the humor and the vision, how quickly and how few words P.G. Wodehouse captures. I mean, hilarious situations. I think language was respected, and it was. My father, in an interview before he died, it was a long time ago now, but they played the interview after he died with David Hanley, the broadcaster, and he said, they were saying, John Kelly, son of privilege. He said, well, I grew up in a house without a book in it. He said, his father had grown up in a house without a book in it, and then his father had sort of become a sort of self-made person. And I think, I often think that if education, there was never business money really around our family. It was really through I think education that they rose. And I think if you've everybody in Ireland probably, if you go back 4 generations, very few people probably really were born into much money. But I think that probably there are families where education was absolutely the road to self-improvement. So I think that was a trope that was incredibly strong. I'm looking back and nobody spoke about it, but I think it must have been so.
That's amazing, like literally lifted from the land by virtue of education.
Well, there's a story which it's very interesting. I've become quite interested as oftentimes when you get older, and especially as a filmmaker, there's incredible stories about my grandfather, my father's father, who I remember. He died when I was kind of only a young, like probably 7 or 8, but I do remember him bringing us these incredible expeditions. But the story in the house was that he had, in our family anyway, was that he had gone at the age of 20 to Argentina with his brother to be a manager in a bank where the 3 previous bank managers had been shot dead by bandits. So this is what we told ourselves anyway. This is what we'd heard. and apparently, when he had been a small child, at the age of 10, he was in very, very poor circumstances in, I think, Roscommon. And there was a tree planting competition in the local sort of big house. And he won the tree planting competition, and the man who was the owner of the big house spotted him, and I think may have helped him with his, to pay for his school fees. And I always remember that when I was a very small boy, we went on a conker gathering expedition, and we came home with a big sack of conkers, and he made me cut a notch in one, and we put it in our back garden and of the family home in Donnybrook. And when that house was sold, the tree that I had planted as a 7-year-old was now the tallest tree in the garden. And so that was that's the main thing I remember about my paternal grandfather. But I think, so, I don't know how all that stuff plays through, but I think he was and I have a painting, a beautiful painting that he did, but he was very, he worked in the bank, he worked up through the bank, and so I think late in his life, I think he he regretted not having done more. It's funny about creativity. I mean, everybody's got creativity in them, and it's just a question of whether there's an opportunity and they allow themselves to, how much they go down that road and how much they build up that muscle. But I think it must have been lurking.
And those previous generations laid the foundation for you to have options, and were they encouraging in terms of you could use those options for whatever you wanted, or were you expected to do certain things, or were you a renegade? Like, how did the idea of you...
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny. These are really complicated psychological and social questions. I mean, so my father was a libertarian, and he never forbade us to do anything. I think I can safely say he thought that all sports were stupid, and he only ever saw me play tennis once, and I'm not sure he ever saw me play music at all. And I mean, he died while we were recording our first album, but as the Fat Lady Sings. But at that point, we'd been in a band for a few years. So he terribly worried about us all. I think he did come from a generation where his main worry was we would all still starve to death, which actually, in the 1930s and 1940s, if you look at the Brand Ireland, you see these Gaeltacht that are relocated to Meath. And part of the reason for that was actually because the people in the West Coast were starving to death. And one of the biggest debates, which you never see really talked about in the narrative of modern Ireland, is the extent to which for the first 30 or 40 years even of our country's existence, it was a really live question as to whether we should hand the keys back or whether we could survive. And, I think some incredible people and civil servants and, very selfless people who would not really be thought of as patriots within our cosmology of patriotism, I think made very prudent, good decisions early in the history of the state, which enabled us to keep going. But I think, if you grew up in those times, or if you were, your parents were, I think that was a huge thing. And maybe my father felt it more strongly than others, but he really worried. I remember he came down to Bray, and he was a very busy man because he was a politician. So the thing about doing tennis and rock and roll was he was a very, very accomplished person also. He got kind of second in the country in Irish, or in history in the Leaving Cert, and fifth in Irish. So he was the Attorney General, and he had written textbooks. So even though I did study law, I think it made more sense for me to choose things that he would never have dawned on him to do. If you, that way, if you have to, you have to either fill the boots of your father or step away from them into other boots. And I just thought, okay, it's going to be easier for me to do other things, I think. So, but I think he was kind of bemused. I think he remember once, more in sorrow than in anger, he said, do you realize you're the first person in either branch of this family who turns to sports pages of the newspapers? And he was looking at me kind of in puzzlement, really. He couldn't understand it. And I get, I sort of get that. And then, and I think with music, I mean, it was certainly true that when I started Fat Lady, the only reason I started singing seriously thinking about it is because I went away to New York while I was qualifying as the world's most incompetent solicitor, or certainly I was the most incompetent solicitor's apprentice in Dublin. I was very uninterested in it, but I couldn't think of anything else to do. And I kind of fluked into this 6 months in New York as on a placement, and I started singing in bars, and people were really nice about my voice in bars. And I often think, especially in the sort of 1980s in Ireland, the kinds of people who ended up in rock bands were the kinds of people who looked like they should end up in rock bands. And, there's probably files on them in Garda headquarters. And I was completely not that. So I felt I could never be in a rock band in Ireland. So I made everybody give up their jobs and move to London then with the Fat Lady Sings. So the Fat Lady Sings was always based in London. And I think mainly because I didn't think anybody would take me seriously as a musician in Dublin.
And did that change your success? Because, I mean, I was a massive Fat Lady Sings fan in my teens. And I remember your success pre-getting signed. It was almost like everyone cheering you on. I remember you were the first band to play the National Stadium unsigned since U2 and all that type of stuff. And people were really hyped about you. But were you getting pushback from the leather jacket wearing tough rock people of Dublin, or?
I think in a weird. So I'm only thinking about this now. It was a weird echo of how I reacted to having a tough time in school, is I just took myself away to somewhere else. Like I didn't really feel that, we were in competition with that house, or something happens, or in Tuanu or whoever. Like I felt we were in competition with George Michael, and I found it very freeing going somewhere where, like, I liked the objectivity of America, and I liked the objectivity of London. It was bloody hard. Like it was like we signed on and we did terrible jobs, and then we, scrimped and saved and bought crappy old vans and all that stuff. But I felt at least everything we achieved, I felt it was kind of quite. I didn't think anybody was going to say, yeah, but I know do you know who his father is? Like, I've never felt that was going to happen to me in London. And then in the weird way of these things, because we started to get good reviews in the English press, then there's a weird thing. And I mean, I think one of the reasons in Ireland why the thing about Ireland is it's the best place in the world to live in if somebody belonging to you dies. And for exactly the same reason, it's the worst place in the world to live in if you decide that you need to fundamentally change who you are in the public gaze. Because there's an incredibly complex network of human relationships that you only become aware of, like around things like bereavement, where the most amazing people write you letters, from like you wouldn't even think of it. And what you realize is that you exist in a really amazing way. Many people feel they have a relationship with you and you with them, like everybody in Ireland feels like they're each other's second cousin. I mean, it's probably changing now a bit, but that thing of the friendliness, and it is an amazing thing, and that intimacy, but it's also predicated on a sort of don't go changing, because you are the matrix is threatened by, because you are in this network, and then if you step out of it, now there's a hole in the network. So I think people find it very difficult when you decide, okay, I'm going to actually be gay rather than straight, or certainly did. I mean, I think Ireland's hugely changed in the last 20 years, but back then, I'm not going to be a solicitor's apprentice, I'm going to be in a rock band. And I mean, obviously derision, but behind the derision, a sort of I think it's a kind of the natural order of things is being threatened here.
But of course, you were the exact same person as the trainee solicitor, as the wannabe rock star. It's the same you.
I think it always is. But it's very interesting how, then you're getting into things like, I generally feel that most of us go through our lives floating 6 feet above ourselves, churning out press releases about who we think we should be, and at any given moment. And I think that may be the nature of the human condition everywhere, but I think certainly in societies where you are very connected to one another, you feel very connected to one another, you feel also an obligation to the connection. And I get that. And then I also think that if you are in any way driven to explore other places, I think you must explore those other places. And, you are part of the luckiest cadre of human beings ever to exist in the history of the planet. You are probably not going to starve to death. You're probably not going to be killed in a war. You're probably not going to be struck down by, an incurable disease like that takes away a quarter of the population. So, if you are miserable, occupying your safe, secure, and well tended part of the matrix, you must leave that place and go somewhere else. And I know, and even if it's troubling to other people, you have to go through that. And then, once everybody grows up a bit, then once you do it, the sky doesn't fall in, but I think the jump between thinking, oh my God, and I feel really sorry for young people who they literally think, and I can remember thinking this, that if anybody possibly found out that I was gay, stroke, wanting to be in a rock band, stroke, whatever, like I couldn't bear that. I couldn't bear to live. Like there's no, I can't see beyond the wall of that conversation. I can't see anything. It's just like, it's oblivion. And the thing that when you get older is that it's just the onion. Nobody knows what's really going on. Nobody has a good set of rules. Everybody is making it up as they go along to some extent. But that's huge pressure when you're younger, and especially in a sort of friendlier countries, I think.
But when you mentioned what makes our cadre, as you say, so privileged, I was kind of thinking that our children's generation may not have the same privileges in terms of starvation or safety or environment. Like when you look at what's coming down the future, how do you rationalize that, or how do you steady yourself?
Well, I think the first thing to say is there's the man who's the least well named book in the history of naming of books was surely The End of History by Francis Fukuyama. I know I haven't read the book, and it's probably more smart than its title suggests, but it's innately true of humans to think that we've arrived at a sort of golden age, i.e. us personally, and that everything behind was a kind of like a clawing up to this great moment, and everything that happens after us is basically threatening to decay. I'm quite optimistic about those things. I do think that from a geopolitical point of view, I find it very, very scary how short people's memories are about the incredible hard work of peace. So I have to say is a thing I worry about. I worry about for my children. I think the idea that people would not do the maths of the European Union, which is obviously a thing that is an unwieldy construct, and as with all unwieldy constructs, useless things accrete to it. It's incredibly wasteful. You get the civil servants have the lowest tax rate of all of the countries combined and the highest number of holidays. Whatever. But you look at the maths, look at the body count. Previous 50 years before the European Union was set up, 60 million people dead among European member states, the equivalent to the entire population of the United Kingdom. And in the 50 years or 70 years since, nobody dead. Now, I do that piece of maths, I feel I became frustrated even during the Brexit campaign, because I thought they have to look at this. And that stuff, if you look even around the First World War, people, and even, it's so interesting even around things like positive things for what I would conceive to be positive things like the election of Barack Obama. We live in a time where things are impossible until they become inevitable. Like there's almost no gap between it could never happen, could never happen, could never happen. Oh my God, it's going to happen. And I think wars happen like that, so that's, I hope, so I'm aware of those things. I'm very aware of the environmental issues. I think that I'm incredibly aware that we need to curate ourselves, and just for our own happiness, we need to be less about always trying to grow. But having said all that, I think there's incredible positive energies are always coming up, incredible new ideas, and it's incredibly hard. It's even like futuristic films are made, like Back to the Future, things, the wildest imagination of the most imaginative filmmakers can't come up with the clever, good things that are here either. So I think I'm kind of, provided we don't blow ourselves up, I'm optimistic.
Just a quick jump back to the Fat Lady Sings. Was there a point to the band? Was there an aim? Was there an objective? Was there a desire? What did you hope? How did you hope the world would be affected by your existence? Or did you even think about that?
Oh, I absolutely wanted the world to be very strongly affected by our existence. I think all acts of creativity are driven to some extent by there's an ego there, there's a wanting to be heard, and that's just, and we definitely had that and I personally, as a songwriter, definitely felt that the world should hear my things and my work, and so I think it's like I wanted people to like me for myself. I was really wanted people to like me, but not so I had
Not
that
for
funny,
tennis.
well, yeah, but not for. I wanted them to like me for tennis as well. But there was a moment where I realised that possibly wasn't going to happen, just for purely reasons of limitations of physique and everything. But no, I mean, I think there's a funny. I think when you start this stuff, like you there's a real balance between desperate desire to be successful and the understanding that the only way that you can be successful is if something that you're doing is something that nobody else can do, and there's a kind of a mixture of like insane capitalism and actually Buddhism in that, because to get the work good, it doesn't really work to spend more money or to trample on more people or whatever that is. It's more to do with trusting your body more, that you have, even if you're not sure why a song is interesting or good, that you have to let it happen. And sometimes it's very embarrassing afterwards, because you're what you thought you were doing, even as a writer, people point out to you later you've done something completely different. And I kind of, I can't remember. I think that thing of, I think it was so amazing as well when I saw other people who did amazing stuff. There was some moment where I did realise that, and punk was incredibly important to me, which people may not realise, but the attitude was of punk, which is that, I could tell, even when I was starting to play the guitar, I could see there were people who would always be able to move their fingers faster than me and be able to, be more suave than me and all sorts of things. But I did think, there's a thing I can do that you can't do. There's a thing every one of us can do that nobody else can do. And I think that at some quite early age, I did think, okay, I'm just going to push with this particular muscle that I've been given, and I'm going to do that. And then, of course, I want the world to love that. But I also realized that I didn't have any other thing to do. Everything else I could do would be a very poor imitation of things other people were doing much better.
And, you create worlds, you imagine worlds, and you create them. And I'm just curious as to, at which point did the Fat Lady Sings come closest to your vision of what you wanted it to be? Was there a moment where you felt everything triangulated and this was it, this was what I wanted it to be?
I think it's kind of, I'm sure I did think that way. I think it's kind of now, I think it's kind of a mug's game to want to be something the way you want it to be, if there's more than one person involved, more than you involved. It's very interesting. The best thing I ever did for everybody's career was split Fat Lady Sings, because everybody did much better afterwards in their various, in different ways as musicians and in other ways. So no, it's an interesting thing. I think I wasn't a very good collaborator, and I think I became a much better collaborator almost only after the Fat Lady Sings, and through, I had a couple of very embarrassing moments with other people, like about songwriting, really, where I just suddenly realized that a thing could happen that you were in the room that you were not completely responsible for, and that should just be a shared thing, that the two of you then were equally responsible. And I kind of hadn't really psychologically gone there before, I'm ashamed to say.
And how did you make the move then from the Fat Lady Sings to advertising, which I see is another massive chapter in your life? Not setting aside your own solo work with Nick Kelly, but yeah. Apart from the fact you are the man who put Heyday by Mick Christopher into Guinness ad, which for me, I'll be eternally grateful to you for bringing mixed music to a whole new audience. But I'm curious as to how you got into advertising, how that came about, and what you learned from it.
Well, I mean, it's very simple how it came about. I had split the Fat Lady Sings in total frustration, and frustration with myself largely. And I think it was the whole process of touring. We did a huge long tour of America, and we had got to a certain level, and we were beating our heads off the wall trying to get to the next level. And there was kind of a moment where I kind of realized this is not going to happen for some reason, some combination of me and all of us in the band and all of us around the band and the zeitgeist and everything going on. And it's kind of driving me absolutely mad. I feel like I'm miserable doing this. And it was one of those sudden decisions that happened quite gradually, but like I think probably for everybody else seemed very sudden. And I kind of gave away all my guitars. Everybody was furious with me. I kind of spent 3 months in Brussels to escape all my answering machine messages. And so, I mean, I really did I was going to a meeting to discuss re-releasing Drunkard Logic, which had been the biggest single that we had had. And I just went to the meeting and said, I can't do this anymore, I'm out. And it was very stressful. But it's very stressful for everybody else. For me, I'd already gone through it. So I think rather selfishly, I just was taking up the ball and leaving the pitch a bit. But I didn't feel I could keep going. And so I moved around Europe a little bit, just staying with a friend actually in Brussels for several months. And then I kind of moved back to Ireland and I didn't go to a gig for a year and a half. I didn't have any musical instruments and I didn't go to a gig. And I was just trying to think, what could I do to make money? I did a little bit of teaching, which I've new respect for all teachers because I think it was so hard to work out, just to learn enough to teach. But I just stumbled into ads. Somebody said, oh, you should try copywriting. And I'd always thought of advertising as the great Satan. But everybody seemed so sensitive and caring. And they paid me. It was amazing. And I didn't have a portfolio or anything. I think I was just a curiosity. And somebody brought me in for a day and then for 3 days. And then somebody went to holiday for 2 weeks. And then I was in for 2 weeks. And then I wrote a campaign I wrote nursery rhymes for Hibernia Insurance, and all my nursery rhymes really scanned well. And they suddenly won prizes for that, and then did other ads and Aer Lingus and all these different things. And then I wrote stuff for Walker's Crisps, and I got Roy Keane to mug Gary Lineker, and it was all very logical. It was actually almost like a legal thing. It was like my legal, because it's just advertising is very logical. It's just like make an argument. So, and I remember talking to Walkers and saying, you're competing with a brand who's so loved that the name for the sector, people come in and say, can I have a bag of Tato, even if there's no Tato in the bar or whatever. Said, you have to be the thing that the Brits have stolen from the Irish and the Irish are going to steal back. And I said, this is the script you should make. And they said, yeah, go. So Roy Keane steals Gary Lineker's crisps. And all my ads, I remember I wrote 5 ads for Guinness. And the total dialogue count for the first 4 was 1 word, which was sorry. Wow. And I used to feel very insecure about it because I was thinking everybody's going to think I can't write dialogue. But actually I was really drawn to, and I think songwriting really makes you like that. Because you're always looking, you only have 320 words. So you're always looking for a kind of someone left cake out in the rain, or, I'm a lineman for the county. You're looking for a picture.
I went to see The Drummer and the Keeper on Sunday night, and it totally struck me that your movie-making career, you as a director and writer, was off the back of your time as a songwriter and in advertising. It was like the two combined.
It's all the same. It's all the same muscle. I think the amazing thing about advertising as a kind of a transit point. There's a bunch of things I can say about it, but the first thing is a really obvious thing is I've probably written the scripts for a dozen ads where the budget is over $1 million. So the drummer, which is 3 times the budget where we made The Drummer and the Keeper for, which is a feature film for 60 seconds. So the level of the quality of the people and the production that you get involved in is literally the most expensive form of filmmaking you can see. And then as a copywriter, bizarrely, much more than a screenwriter would, you are immersed in this because you have to choose the directors. You audition for great directors. You choose the ones. You have to look at all the show reels, say, well, look at these 4. And then some of them say, we'll pass. But, but if you get, but you choose between 4. You then get embedded with their production company. You go to all the castings. So, I mean, I was the person in the room when Michael Fassbender walked in London. I mean, I think anybody in the room probably would have said, I think we should look at this guy. But, you know, you're there and you're seeing those things. You go to all the shoots. Like, I wrote my first short film in Iceland on a borrowed computer, like, because somebody said, oh, there's a deadline next week. You know, if you want to write, you should write something. And then you spend weeks and weeks in post-production, like even when the directors might only drop in, but you've got to bring it back to the client. So all those things like, you know, can we see the crisps properly, you know, in this shot?
It's on your head.
It's all on your head. So literally, unless you don't want to know about making films, advertising is a brilliant, brilliant education, practical education. And then I think the biggest thing that advertising gave me, and I mean, and you know, my advertising career sort of worked in tandem with my solo music career. And I think in some respects, as a collaborative musician, I've become, I'm far better. And I think it's partially to do with the fact that advertising is incredibly brutally about the idea. The idea doesn't care who has it. It doesn't. The client could have the best idea. The art director that you work with, or you're the God forbid, the account handler, you know, anybody could have the idea. If it's the best idea in the room, that's the one you go for. And I think that you suddenly become aware, if you're me, of the incredible beauty of collaboration, which is that whatever you have in your head will not be realized in the final product.
The Drummer and the Keeper, I loved it. I think it's a brilliant movie, and I kind of felt that from the first frame I saw of it. But it's such a brave movie because you've tackled some topics head on that would have been so easy to get wrong, and you didn't. I just thought it was very gutsy, and without being syrupy, it just felt real and entertaining and uplifting, and managed to avoid a lot of cliches in a space that has a lot of cliches that have been issued in the past. What brought you to it?
Well, thank you. First of all, I mean, thank you. You know, I'm really gratified at how I mean, it's such early days, but you know, I'm really gratified by all the nice things that are being said about The Drummer and the Keeper. I have to say that the thing that's even more gratifying for me and is kind of amazing for me is to sit in cinemas, because I think it does produce a really strong emotional response in audiences, which, like, I love the laughs, and we get a lot of laughs, and it's a comedy, you know, it's pitched as a comedy, and all buddy movies are kind of comedies, but I think it leaves an emotional impact, which I'm kind of almost surprised. I'm almost surprised at how emotional people get about it. But an awful lot of that is to do with, and an awful lot of the things when you talk about the bravery and all of that stuff. I mean, I don't feel it's brave at all, but I do think it's truthful. And I think the great thing about truth is that that's the enemy to all cynicism and to all corniness. I mean, if actually the characters are behaving like characters that are real humans behave, you're allowed to have fun with that, and it'll be fine. And I think that, I suppose the thing I felt, I felt I really knew about rock and roll and how the bandwidth of acceptable behavior is sometimes pretty broad, and that is both an incredible freedom, and was, by the way, an incredible freedom for somebody like me, like a nerd. It's like being in New York. Like, they don't know that you don't have an Uzi. So suddenly everybody can swagger in New York because, you know, the city is bigger than anybody. And rock and roll has that quality that it's a broad, you can get away with being really dysfunctional, and also be in all sorts of ways. But it's also, I think, then it can also be very cruel and an incredibly, the up and down of it can be very, very triggering for people. So if you do have a mental health issue, I think you could, and I've often seen people who are both drawn to rock and roll because they there's a bipolarity that's inherent in rock and roll. It's like 90% boredom, 10% terror. Like it's like you're waiting for the gig, you're waiting for the gig, you're waiting for the gig. Like 23 hours of the day are waiting for the gig, and then it's the gig. And I think that people who are themselves have those kind of extremes of, you know, desire for huge affirmation, and then who also can find themselves going really low, or somehow they map onto rock and roll quite often. So I've seen a lot of people in rock and roll who've had mental health issues, and, you know, at different times. And then I think I have a child with autism, and I kind of feel I really know that world quite well. So once I chose actors who I felt really got the story we were trying to tell, and they did a huge amount of work and they embedded themselves, I think we all felt there's no reason we couldn't tell that story. I didn't feel brave about it. I felt
but the whole scenario was invented. Like, you invented this scenario.
Yeah. Oh, why? Well, I think, there's an interesting, the other thing about, the basic inspiration for the story is really a kind of almost a different thing, which is about friendship, which is, I've always found a bit like that sort of, that networky thing I was talking about earlier about Ireland. We're also connected. But actually what happens is we're also connected because our perceptions of each other are connected. It's like, it's, Mr. Bun the baker, and whatever. Everybody's got their job and their role. And what happens in moments of crisis, I think very often, you yourself have been colluding in this kind of image of yourself, and everybody's going along, and suddenly all these people are close to you and I really want to help. They're kind of useless because you suddenly are a different person. That's not what you need. And the weirdest people come out of the woodwork, who you would never choose to be your friends, would never imagine would be helpful, and they are. And I've just seen that happen so often in life that, you don't get the friends that you want, we all curate our friendships very carefully, but actually, at moments of crisis, you find out who your friends are. And who your friends are, they're weirdos sometimes. They're the weirdest people. But they're the people who actually you spiritually need, or you emotionally need. And I really liked that idea of the unlikely friendship thing. And I think was my fundamental thing about the film, is I wanted to do that. And I thought that the bringing together the worlds of bipolar disorder and the hedonistic and kind of chaotic world of rock and roll, and the incredibly linear, and oftentimes, if you have autism, because unexpected things are incredibly unpredictable and therefore incredibly stressful for you. So there's an incredible propensity to do one thing and just keep doing it really without variation. And it's almost like a mantra that allows you to put one foot in front of the other. So those two incredibly different energies, I just thought, what a brilliant context to explore that. And then you just have to find a way you bring them together. And then the story, I can't explain it just sort of writes itself in a way, I think.
And where does filmmaking fit into your plans for your life in the coming years?
Oh, well, quite largely. I think it's, I don't feel this massive difference between the instincts that allowed me to make music and the instincts that allow me to make films. I am incredibly excited about making films at the moment. I think, I feel like I've got a whole instinct, and I've had luck with it in a way that I think I feel I've got further quicker in film than I have in other areas. But I also feel it's because it's the same muscle. I think I always joke about the 10,000 hours thing. I think I spent 8,500 hours making ghastly mistakes in the music industry, and now in film they're exactly the same ghastly mistakes you could make, but you don't make them twice. So you come into it as an idiot, but you're sort of idiot savant, like you do know more. And I think that, I think that I would say, I think it's going to probably take up much more of my time in the next, going forward, film rather than music. But having said that, I think I'll always make music.
I expected all the music in the movie to be by you. And of course it's not.
No.
And it almost for me, there's like a metaphor there in your collaboration, as in you brought all these different people in. But I don't know why I assumed that. Like, he makes music. Why wouldn't he make all the music in the movie?
Oh well, like I mean, because I wouldn't be good at it for a start. But I mean, I know, and I think I do think that the great gift of, like, if I was to make movies in my 20s, I would have made terrible movies because I hadn't really understood that. As soon as, like, if you want to do perfect things, do solo things, paint a painting. If you get into either rock and roll, but especially film, I mean, on the credits, like, there's 200 or 300 people who are working on my film. And the thing is, every single one of those people changes your film. Now so there's only two things you need to focus on. Choose incredibly carefully. And once you've chosen, then there's one other really simple choice. Do you empower them? It won't be the same as what you thought it would be. It will never be the same as it. So the choice is, do you empower the people you've chosen so carefully to make your film unimaginably better than it would have been if it was what you had in your head? Or do you shackle them so that they screw it up so that it's unimaginably worse than the thing you had in your head? It won't be the thing you had in your head. And I think it makes me so excited now, the gifts that the actors, that my producer Kate, that my cameraman Tom, that, like, the editor Derek, every one of them will bring, and all of those people, Louise and her brother who designed the Lego mansion. I mean, I didn't write the Lego mansion the way they designed it, but when I saw it, I rewrote bits of the script to accommodate. I knew I wanted a Lego mansion, but every one of those people are bringing me gifts all the time, and I feel like king, like a king, like, just having these great plates of fruit and kind of jellies being brought up to me, and I think that's, well, let me say, I think if that doesn't excite you, if that threatens you rather than excites you, you definitely shouldn't be making films, and you probably shouldn't be making records. And I feel the records that I make now, I am better able to accept the gifts of other people than I used to be.
And I think Irish people need to learn to collaborate better. I think it's something we need to get better at. And I think in terms of our future, in terms of making society better, I think there's wider lessons for society in terms of what you've learned about collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is there's a sort of a weird confidence about collaborating where a lot of the time you think, oh, if I was to admit that I didn't know how to do something, it makes me look so bad in the eyes of everybody else. But what you kind of come to realize is that there are some things which you're really good at, and all these other people are going to help you do those things, and I think you get much more relaxed about saying, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, I mean, like things like, for example, cameras. I mean, I do own a good camera now. I can sort of take photos. I do sometimes shoot things myself. But I mean, I'm under no illusion that what I am doing with my camera physically is in any way as good as what my director of photography will do with the camera, with the same camera. But that's fine, because there's a thing that I've got that it's almost enjoying. It's like enjoying assembling the dictionary or something, enjoying being like the Encyclopedia Britannica, like a weird Britannica. Every film is a weird Britannica.
Well, I can't wait to see where your movie making career takes you. If you've started with this, Nick, I'm really excited for the future. And thank you so much for making this time in the middle of a really busy period. And I'm just delighted that we got to do this while the movie is still fresh in the cinemas, and hopefully lots more people will go and see it. It's amazing. Great movie. I'm so glad I went.
Thank you so much.
That was the amazing Nick Kelly. What an interesting chap. Nick is the type of guy you could talk to for literally hours. There's so many places you could go on any particular topic with Nick. Always a thrill getting to chat to him. And I'm so happy that his debut movie, The Finder and the Keeper, is going so well. And I urge anyone out there, go and see it. You won't regret it. it's one of those films that you come out of it going, I'm really glad I did that. And you'll come out of it, recommend it to your friends. I guarantee that. That was Nick Kelly, and I'm so happy he joined us on Born Optimistic, and I'm so glad that you decided to tune in. Without you listening, there would be no point, really, would there? Thank you so much, and look forward to next week's show. And until then, I've been Donald Scanlon, and you've been listening to Born Optimistic. For more information, check out bornoptimistic.com. Thank you very much. Bye.